my fellow Americans. This evening, I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell, and to share a few final thoughts with you, my countrymen. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
There were just many, many Americans, millions and millions, who were tied into the military-industrial complex, which he defined as the kind of joint influence of the military and the arms industry. Certainly that concept of the military-industrial congressional complex makes a lot of sense, because really sometimes Congress is as big a problem as the Pentagon in that they will add weapons to the Pentagon budget that even the Pentagon itself has not requested.
Our nation's military establishment and the industries associated with it have an unwarranted influence on our society. With a new administration and the pattern of continually ignoring former President Eisenhower's warning against the military-industrial complex, a change needs to be made. Despite the negative aspects of the military-industrial complex, there are those who see it as a positive element in our society.
I can tell you that America is the only great superpower in the world, and we can do a great deal to promote peace by continuing to be that superpower and projecting an image of strength. And one of the ways we project an image of strength is by investing resources to continue to enhance our military. In this way, some bad guys out there might think twice before they do something stupid and mess with another country or invade us, or as North Korea has recently threatened to do, destroy one of our aircraft carriers.
So you ask me, do I think military spending right now in Trump's budget and the increase for the Pentagon is desirable? I would say, in light of the world that we're living and the unpredictable characters that we're dealing with, North Korea really does concern me tremendously. I think that actually Trump's budget addresses what is a growing problem, yes. So many jobs are dependent on it, not to mention all the cottage industries that are associated with defense spending too. No, it's a big part of our economy, yeah. So again, back to your question, who benefits? Jobs. That's something we probably should have mentioned, too. I mean, there are jobs related to the defense industry. Whether or not those are the types of jobs maybe you think that should be cultivated and sustained at times, that comes down to your position, on whether or not the Pentagon budget is in the interest of the country, the big Pentagon budget that we have. But you're right, jobs are related there too, and Connecticut alone, I mentioned Sikorsky, and Groton submarines, and a lot of people are employed under the defense industry. But it does affect taxpayers, and it also, I think, in many ways, also helps and really nourishes, if you will, those private contractors that are involved in defense contracts and defense production.
The military wastes a lot of money, so it's not a question of just how much; it's also a question of what it's doing with its money, right?
deficit and the debt that we have in this country is not due to the military-industrial complex. It's due to entitlement programs. And until those get under control, then we're going to have these problems with national debt. So
Maybe a little bit too much attention is paid to whether the budget's higher or lower. It seems like the military always gets its money, right? They just assume that they're going to get what they want, and sometimes even more.
All right, so apparently President Trump has said the current military has become too depleted, obsolete, and too small to protect America's interests. I won't argue with my commander-in-chief on those points. I'm sure he has access to a lot of information that I don't. What I can tell you is that the Marine Corps is among the services who aren't beefing up their number of personnel. We certainly would be wise, in my personal opinion, to invest further resources in both our fighting equipment and our support equipment, making sure that the Marines have what they need to be safe, or as safe as they can when they're going into combat. So I think, like I said earlier, I'm going to trust the president on that, and with the understanding that there's always some politics involved in these things. I do think investing wisely in our military is generally a very good idea. Another great question. You guys put a lot of time into these questions, I can tell, and I really appreciate that. But the question is whether, I guess, I feel personally and generally whether soldiers and Marines who go into combat are paid enough. And I would say that, first, from a personal perspective, of course, I do feel that I was paid fairly. There are some benefits, financial benefits, that you and your family get from having served, and I've certainly had the great privilege of taking advantage of some of those. On the other hand, we have veterans who come back from combat either suffering from mental injury or suffering terrible physical injuries. And from that perspective, I don't think we can pay these people enough. I don't think there isn't a way to really repay them for all that they gave. Money can't do that. So from that perspective, maybe not. Maybe we can just do our best to take care of them and their families and try to repay them for what they gave us.
According to the VA's Inspector General, on Monday, the department released an audit of VA hospitals and clinics across the country. It shows 57,000 military veterans have been waiting more than 3 months to see a doctor, and another 64,000 appear to have fallen through the cracks. As Wyatt Andrews reports from Washington.
And the veterans' hospitals are an absolute disgrace right now. We've had veterans who've had to wait for so long to get services, and we do have a lot of vets coming out of Afghanistan and Iraq having multiple tours.
And then, of course, the best part is coming home. You guys know my children, at least some of them. Taylor, who I think you probably know the best, she was in first grade. And so when I came home...
Oh, buddy.
I miss you.
I miss you, too.
My name is Bill Brown. I'm a colonel in the United States Marine Corps, and I served in Iraq in 2005. And now I'm a lawyer, and I work for the Knights of Columbus in New Haven, Connecticut.
Professor Stephen Michaels of Government Politics and Global Studies at Sacred Heart University.
All right.
Absolutely. A lot of our equipment dates back to the Vietnam War. Being a Marine, I know that very recently there was a significant aircraft unit who had to ground a number of their fighter jets because the parts are worn out and they didn't have the resources to replace them. That really shouldn't be happening today. We are a country that has enough resources to properly outfit our military.
Sometimes there's an oversight problem, and we do know that the companies that are involved at times in manufacturing military goods overcharge, and often it's uncovered what we have to pay for some of this. But the equipment is expensive. It truly is. And it is true, having been in the military myself, I can tell you this, that there is at times, a lot of equipment that goes by the wayside, and you wonder who's paying for all this, and it doesn't seem as if at times that it's all that, effective and useful.
I mean, one of the reasons we're as secure as we are is just because our enemy is not as devious as we think they are, and they're also not as smart as we think they are. We give them way too much credit. We spend way too much money on too much of the wrong things. So we can spend a lot of money and be less safe, or we can be smarter and spend less money. And too often, the figure of the actual budget is substituted for efficiency or security, and that's where the real danger lies.